Welcome to the Old Classic Car channel. In this compilation we are looking at cars of the 1980s, Volume 2. Having a bit of work done upon it is this early 1980s W-plate Morris Ital Saloon in beige, wheels off, perhaps a hub job, brake job, something like that. This was at the NEC Classic Car Show just a year or two ago. Next up in this compilation of 1980s cars, one of Tony's photos here of a particularly fine Rover SD1 3.5 litre V8 engine under that swooping bonnet. Okay, rear three-quarter view now of one of Ford's finest, the Ford Escort XR3i, the Mark III Escort based XR3i. This one on a Y plate from about 1982. From a similar angle, but this time at Capesthorne Hall Classic Car Show, we have a mighty Datsun, the Datsun Laurel, this one registered late in 1983. Quite a handsome looking car. Unusual to see two-tone paint on a car of this era as well. Let me know in the comments if you've owned any of the 1980s cars featured here. Now we are over near Oswestry at the Ironworks Centre, classic car morning meet, and this is a very unusual Vauxhall, the Vauxhall Cavalier SR. Not the SRI, but the SR. And this is a particularly rare variant of this era of Cavalier. We're back at the NEC, and on a B registration we have a Talbot Alpine, the Talbot Alpine Rapier, circa 1984, and again a two-tone paint job. We are down at Bicester Heritage now on a V registration, a particularly rare sight here in the UK, the Auto Bianchi A112, circa 1980. Behind it a Saab 900, itself a car that was so popular throughout the 1980s. Now we are down at the Morton Hampstead Motor Museum, and on a about 1985 registration is this particularly rare open top version of the Talbot Samba. These used to be a pretty common sight once upon a time, but now I can't remember the last time I saw one of those on the road. Okay, next up in this compilation of 1980s cars, we are over at Alton Park, the racing circuit, and a particularly eye-catching Citroën 2CV. Continuing this volume 2 look at cars of the 1980s, same venue, different occasion. This is a D-plate Nissan Bluebird Turbo, one of the hot versions of the Nissan stroke Datsun Blackbird. Same venue, again different event, I'm not quite sure which one this was, but on a G registration we have a convertible version of the Porsche 944. This is a particularly rare sight, URM 499X. That is a Mitsubishi Lancer, and that particular car dates way back to 1982, so well over 40 years of age, this particular car when it was photographed. That is a particularly rare sight here in the UK, and you don't see these too often either. This is a fairly early example of the Renault 5 Turbo, Y-Reg, so about 1982 or early 83. Thanks to Vince for this photograph. This is a car that I've also seen down at the NEC, the Rolls-Royce Camargue. Quite an unusual looking car. Proportions are a little bit strange, but yeah, all very, very early 1980s. Now we have this, the Triumph Acclaim, the last gasp, I suppose, of the Triumph car name. This one on a Y registration based on the Honda Ballade, or Ballade, depending on how you pronounce it. Another fast Ford here, the RS 1600i, based on the front-wheel drive Mark III Ford Escort, a particularly rare variant of the front-wheel drive Escort, much rarer I believe than the XR3i, and alongside it an RS Turbo. Classic Jaguar time here, and we have a Series 3 Jaguar XJ6 in particularly fine condition. Really nice looking car, this one on the Kent alloy wheels, very smart indeed. Revised by Pininfarina, they took the Series 2 and revised it to make this the Series 3. And from the mid-1980s we have the Renault Fuego Turbo, quite a rakish looking coupe, very rare sight now. Classic Audi time now, 5-cylinder Audi, circa 1985, C666 KEG. This Audi Quattro was first put on the road in August of 1985. Not a Delta Integrale, this is the probably much rarer Lancia Delta HF Turbo. That's on the G plate, so that tells us it's registered right at the end of our time period, 1989 or possibly early 1990. Bit of work in progress here with this mighty Volvo estate, the 740 GLE wagon. This one is also about 1989 in date. Those hydraulic lifts, those ramps look particularly useful. I wouldn't mind a set of those if anyone's got a spare set that they don't want anymore. Back to a classic car show now, and BRN 16V, the uber rare now Vauxhall Royale Coupe. Looks very similar to the Opel Monza, you don't see many of those, but these Vauxhall Royales, wow, these are particularly scarce now. Classic Saab time here, very late example, V-Reg. Example of the Saab 96. You can tell it's a late one, it's got those big safety bumpers on it, most of the ones you see don't have those, and this one appears to have the Ronal wheels, very similar in style to the Mini Lights. Over to France now for this one, an X-plate, about 1981, that is the Talbot Matra Marina, and yeah, late 81 or early 1982 the date of this particular car. Quite an unusual car indeed. 3 abreast seating, I believe. Another Honda here, H-plate, H975, EMJ, the Honda Legend Saloon, a luxury car for Honda of the mid-1980s, mid to late 1980s. This one is right at the end of the time period, about 1990 this one, but it's close enough. And on a Y registration, so about 1982, we've got a little Fiat here, the little Fiat 127, one of the facelifted Fiat 127s, the 1050CL. Bit of Honda rally action here now, a B registered car. This is a Honda Civic from 1984. How many of you watching this compilation remember these back in the 1980s and 1990s? They were everywhere at one time. Rover Group action now with the Metro GTA. Of course, hot Metros, there was the MG Metro and the Metro Turbo, but in later years, this is about 1989, they came out with this, the Metro GTA. Maestro here on a B registration, so about 1984. This looks like one of the slightly more upmarket versions, perhaps with that metallic paint, but whether it's got the talking dash of the early Maestros, I'm not quite sure, but if you know this car, please let me know in the comments. Does this one have the talking dashboard, which some of them did? Classic Vauxhall time now, the Vauxhall Astra GTE in Mark II guise here. Next up in this collection of 1980s cars we have a very rare Volvo, built by Bertoni between 1986 and 1990. This is the Volvo 780, a two-door coupe. Very rare car. I remember when these first came out, but I don't think I ever saw one outside of a show. Classic Ford time again, circa 1985, Ford Escort RS Turbo, a turbocharged front-wheel drive Escort. Head on view now, circa 1985, the Rolls-Royce Silver Spirit. This was in the classic car auction area of one of the NEC classic car shows just a couple of years ago. Quite an unusual shade, very, very pale yellow. I wonder where this one is now. And we are at Ragley Hall in the Auto Jumble area, and one of the stall holders regularly turns up in this magnificent Citroen CX wagon. What an incredible car that is. A huge load space in that one, so plenty of room for automobilia and a classic car parts, I would imagine. Thanks to Tony for this photo, he sent this over a little while ago. We've got a V-Reg, 79 or 1980, Vauxhall Cavalier, the four-door Cavalier saloon. Golf GTI now, the hot hatch, all the way from Volkswagen in Germany, YMV 578Y, very, very smart three-door GTI there. The VW Polo alongside that, the Polo Coupe. Continuing this trawl through the 1980s, here we have an Audi G490 RGN. Looks like an Audi 80, I think. It could be the slightly more at market 90, but I think this is the 80. Back down to the NEC Classic Car Show. Now here's a rare car, the Ford Cortina XR6. This was a South Africa only model, powered by the 3-litre Essex V6 engine. You've got a wing on the back and that very distinctive louver over the back window, so someone has clearly personally imported this one, but what a great car that is. And we're back to Honda Civics of the 1980s, this one on a G registration. Classic BMW here now. This is the BMW 3 Series. This is the E30 era of 3 Series. You could get open top cars, 2-door saloons as we've got here, 4-door saloons, and of course the Touring Estate. But yeah, very handsome looking car. No unnecessary fripperies, just a good solid saloon. Okay, now we are over at Avro Heritage, one of their classic car meets, and we have a W-Reg Austin Metro here. Non-original wheels, but otherwise looks pretty original. Who remembers those floppy radio aerials, those rubbery sort of radio aerials on the front wing there? Ford Granada here, one of the gear models, one of the upmarket versions of the Granada for the 1980s. These replaced the much earlier, much boxier type that came along in the 1970s. This was a real fresh sheet of paper design when it came to the Granada. This is at Weston Park. Here we are in Portugal, and we have what is probably a Spanish built, a license built example of the Renault 4. I do like those. I wouldn't mind one of those. I'd quite happily go over to Portugal and drive one of those home. And we are over at the Commonplace meeting, and a very smart Toyota Supra. This one is a regular. It's on an F plate, so 1988 or early 1989 is the registration date for this particular car. It's always turned up in immaculate condition, very, very shiny red paintwork. Difficult to keep red paint looking that shiny. And a slice of America here now, a 592 TBW, a 1985 Chrysler New Yorker 5th Avenue, apparently. In the 1980s, some American cars weren't all that common a sight here in the UK, so this would have caused quite a stir, I imagine, with the neighbours if you pulled up with that on your driveway. And the good old Mini, had to be several of those in here. This is FBA 12Y, a very, very clean example of the Mini Mayfair. This was one of the more upmarket cars. We've got non-original Mini-like wheels on this one, but yeah, it looks to be in really, really nice condition. This was in a classic car auction. And we are in the car park area at Alton Park, and we have an E28 era BMW 5 Series. Very, very nice too. This is a 520i, the 2-litre straight 6 under that bonnet. It's currently showing a sawn and off the road, but hopefully it'll be back out and again very, very soon. And a Rover 800 here, the big 5-door hatchback version of the Rover 800. This is a pre-facelift car. They changed the grille and so on these slightly later ones, but this is an F-plater from 88 or 1989. And we are down at Malvern at the Three Counties Showground, and we've got G196 ALC, the mighty Audi Avant, the 100 Avant, the estate, very, very aerodynamic. Lots of claims about low CDs in those days, sort of 0.30 was a number bandied around, I think. Another classic Toyota here, in very, very good company. Oh, there's one of those old Paralanian campers behind it, and an Austin Cambridge alongside it. Yes, so very, very good company on a particularly sunny day at Alton Park. That is a Celica, by the way. We are back to Woodford and just pulling into the car park. One of those fiberglass bodied Reliant Scimitar SS1s circa 1985 follows in a particularly green Mustang of much later build. Continue our look at cars of the 1980s. We have a B plate, a German looking registration plate on this one, but yeah, early 1980s, about 1984, one of the 123 series coupes, the E-Class Coupe. C123 was the internal model identifier for that particular car. Back down at Malvern, we have a Renault 11 GTL queuing into the main showground down there. This one, an F-plater, about 1988. Quite a rare sight now with these little 5-door hatches. Yeah, nice to see one of those out and about. And we are at Crewe Heritage, that's where we photographed this one. This car pops up at many shows. It's a mid-1980s Daimler DS 420. These were based on the old 420G Jaguar running gear. That's the platform under there, and shared the 4.2 litre XK engine with it. Now we are down at Wem for the Vehicles of Interest show in Shropshire. This is a Volvo 480 ES. So yeah, quite a wild looking car, and like the old P1800s, if you took the badges off, you'd never really guess that was a Volvo. Classic Peugeot time here, very, very nice too. It's on a private plate, this one, 841 NPU. This is a 505 GTI dating to 1987. What a handsome looking car that is. Down at Bicester, there's my youthful assistant in the background, but in the foreground we have a Volvo 245, the estates version of the Volvo 240. That one on a W plater, so just comes in at the beginning of the decade, about 1980 or thereabouts. Classic Cortina now, and again a classic estate car. This one about 1981 or early 82. It's the Mark V Ford Cortina, produced shortly before the introduction of the Ford Sierra, which was a very, very different looking car compared to the boxy Cortina. This is the Nissan Cherry Europe. This is a collaboration between Nissan and Alfa Romeo. Nissan provided the bodywork, and Alfa Romeo much of the running gear, including the wheels that you can see there, and the Alfa engine under that bonnet. But that's a very rare car. Alfa's version was called the Arna, A-R-N-A. And we are at Cholmondeley Castle, classic car show here, and a really smart Opel Manta Coupe. That one on an E plate, about 1987 I would have thought, or early 1988. There's a similarly aged Metro in the background as well. Now we spotted this one outside an antique centre just a year or two ago. Quite a late example of the Morris Marina Coupe. This one on a V plate, and alongside it is a V8 engined Rover P4 of all things. Neither of them look like they've moved in a little while, but hopefully that's not their final resting place. And here, the Citroën BX, the 16 TGS Meteor limited edition, circa 1990. So it just about sneaks in, because this is very much a car, the design of which is from the 1980s. More French action here, and a Peugeot 205 here in cabriolet form. H24 ANH is the registration of this particular car, seen down at WEM Vehicles of Interest, with an MGB GT alongside. Okay, now we've had a couple of Escorts already, and this is the booted equivalent. This is the Ford Orion. It's a 1.6i gear, so this is the posh one if you like. So it's got those body mouldings down the side, alloy wheels, the pop-up glass sunroof, and in this case, a boot spoiler. Now, did they all have those boot spoilers? I'm not sure. And here, a much stretched and much raised Ford Granada. This was in the auction area at Alton Park a couple of years ago during, I think, the Gold Cup meeting. And well, it has actually got a price in the window, £2,900, clearly being used on wedding duties. A couple of classic Renault 5s here. There's a turbo second along, but in the foreground, a really smart A-plate Renault 5, probably a TL, I would guess. Bit of work in progress, judging by that front wing, but yeah, great to see some of these sort of less powerful versions of once popular cars on display at shows. And here at Trentham Gardens, I think we are for this one, a somewhat modified 126 Series S-Class Mercedes-Benz, and that follows in slightly older Triumph Spitfire 1500. Now a bit of classic Jaguar here. On the C-plate we have the Jaguar XJSC. So this is the sort of cabriolet version of the XJS before the full convertible was introduced just a few years later. This one's been fitted with a leaper in the middle of the bonnet, but that wouldn't have been a standard fitting. Now we are over at Audlam for the Festival of Transport and the very, very sporty MG Maestro. I think this may be the MG Maestro Turbo, in fact. So that one bobs along quite well by all accounts. They didn't make too many of those, and survivors are very few and far between. Classic Capri here, RCP 250X. This is the V6 powered Capri 3-litre S, first registered September of 1981. There is a Consul Capri alongside with a matching Portafold Caravan behind it. What a great combination that is. Okay, rival to Ford back in the day, this is the Vauxhall. This is the Mark I Vauxhall, or in this case Opel GTE. So we typically had the Vauxhall Astras, and this is the Opel Kadett GTE. So that is a rare sight here in the UK. Were they ever sold here new? I don't remember. Anyway, had a few Renaults, and here we have the Renault 21. This is the Quadra four-wheel drive version of the Renault 21, this one on a G plate, and yeah, that's quite an unusual sight. There is a Renault 21 Turbo mouldering away outside a garage that I know of, and it's been there for years. I'm surprised no one saved it. Okay, now we have a Pontiac Trans Am, circa 1981. Back to Alton Park, and there is the rally area in the background in the middle of the infield. And this is a Mark I version of the Toyota MR2. This one looks like it gets used for a bit of club competition, judging by the cut-off switch at the bottom of the windscreen pillar there, and those big fog lights strapped to the front bumper. The Jaguar XJ40 is next, this one on a G plate. Now when these were introduced, you could either get a 2.9 or a 3.6. This is the 2.9 XJ6 from 1990. It's currently shown as being sawn, i.e. off-road notification, so it's not on the road at the moment, but hopefully we'll see it out and about again soon. Now a Toyota, a very rare Toyota here on a D registration, a Corolla fastback of 1986, and I think this one is also used for a bit of club rallying. I'm sure we've seen this out and about somewhere. Back to Peugeots for a moment. You often see 205 GTIs, but the 309s, in whatever form, they're pretty thin on the ground now. This is a D-plate Peugeot 309, the 5-door hatchback. Audi here, DEM 160X. This is a 1981 Audi 100 CS, and at the time Audi was still quite a rare-ish sight. They weren't all that common here in the UK at that time, unlike now where they're everywhere. But yeah, these boxy saloons are quite an unusual sight even 40 years ago. Back to American cars for a moment. We've got G232 TYO, a Cadillac DeVille. Amazing car, left-hand drive as well. Next up in our compilation, we are back over at Cholmondeley Castle and the Ford Fiesta Super Sport. Very nice car. The Super Sport was only available with the Mark I Fiestas. This one at the beginning of the decade, about 1980 or thereabouts. So yeah, great to see that one. And you don't see these all that often. This was at Weston Park Classic Car Show, the Volvo 440. I always thought it looked like one team designed the front, another designed the back, and then they joined them in the middle. They always look, very low, sleek front and quite a boxy back. But yeah, certainly a very distinctive car now. And look at this. This was at the Ironworks Centre at Oswestry. The Toyota Tercel, the four-wheel drive Toyota Tercel Estate. Very unusual car that is, and that must be quite a practical car, but I wonder what it's like to find parts for. If you know what parts availability is like for cars like this, let me know in the comments. Okay, back to Vauxhalls. UFR 851V, a Vauxhall Royale Saloon. We saw the rakish coupe before, and this is the equivalent four-door saloon, and again, properly rare car here. Very smart alloy wheels on this car, and yeah, great to see that one out and about. And we're back to old Audis, A8 NUV. That looks very much like an Audi 80 to me. And continuing our look back at cars of the 1980s, we've got a good old Triumph here, rear three-quarter view of the TR7 drop head coupe. When the TR7 first came out, they were only available as the fixed head coupes. And given that all the TRs prior to that did have convertible roofs, a lot of people were up in arms about this. So after several years, they introduced a drop-top version. Now we are back at Alton Park, and a very smart-looking TVR, one of the S-Series cars of the 1980s. This one about 1989 in date, I would have thought. Classic Vauxhall here, and it's great to see a non-sporty model on an F-plate. We have a five-door Vauxhall Nova hatchback. So nice to see this one. No temptation, fortunately, to put big wheels on it and all that kind of thing. This looks pretty much as it rolled out of the Vauxhall dealers circa 1988. And how about this fairly late example of the Fiat X19, the Bertoni designed Fiat X19 with a little mid-engine car. What a great thing that is. You can just see the engine sits under that black panel behind the rear window. Yeah, and the access actually wasn't too bad. I was quite surprised looking at that car a little later on. Okay, we are back down at the NEC Classic Car Show, and we have a Mark II version of the Vauxhall Astra, this time an estate car version. Very, very practical, and look at those original wheel trims on it. Every car nowadays seems to have alloy wheels as standard, but in the old days, steel wheels with plastic trims were quite common. Okay, down there's a slightly damp Bista Heritage, and we've got D521 FDL, particularly smart, particularly wide Ferrari Testarossa. One of my favourite cars of the 1980s. Got about 1984 Saab 900 Turbo 16S, one of the flat front cars. And I really, really liked these when they first came out, with the body cladding down the side and those very distinctive three-spoke alloy wheels as well. What a great looking car. We're back to Crew Heritage, and we have an assortment of Austin Maestros here. This, I think, is one of the slightly upmarket versions, judging by the stripes and those wheel trims, possibly even the Van den Plas. If you know your Maestros, please let me know in the comments what model we are looking at there, but I think it is one of the posher ones. And look at this. These were quite a hot saloon of the day. On an X-plate, this is the Fiat Mirafiori Sport. There's a similar car parked alongside it, but these were great. I mean, they rusted like crazy, so how these two have survived is anyone's guess, but yeah, so great to see those out and about. Now we go back to Audis. This is a fairly early example of the Audi GCJ103W, the UR Series Quattro from 1981. We are back over in Portugal for this shady photograph. Just enjoying the shade under a tree is a very well used Mercedes-Benz 190E, and you still see quite a lot of these in daily use over there, which is really good to see. These were very well made cars, one of the last properly built Mercs for many years, these in the E-Class. And we are at an evening meeting here, classic cars, all sorts of things turn up at this particular meeting, and we've got a fairly late Ford Escort RS 2000 here. This one about 1980, or it could just be creeping into 1981, but definitely one of the last cars before the front-wheel drive XR3 came along. Now we have seen Metros already, and this is the Metropolitan, apparently, a Crayford convertible conversion of the Austin Metro. What an unusual sight that is. There's one of the Wolseley Hornets in the foreground, but the Metro-based version, that is, must be almost unique now. And we're back down, I think, at Malvern for this particular photo, and about 1984 Renault 18 estate car. That's, yeah, what a treat to see that. Again, it's lovely to see these regular models as opposed to all the hot versions all the time. Those are the ones that tend to get preserved, and the less glamorous examples, not so often. Now we've got a classic Saab. This is the 900 Turbo Carlson limited edition based on the 16 valve 900 Turbo. We're back down at Bicester in the public car parking area, and on a G plate we have this 1990 Toyota Carina 4-door saloon. Lovely Peugeot here, the 405. Now is this the MI16, the hot saloon version of the 405 range? It certainly looks like one, although lots of these cars have been broken and the MI16 engine removed and shoehorned in to the Peugeot 205 GTIs. So yeah, nice to see that one. And look at this, we saw the Volvo 780 before, and this is Bertoni's earlier creation based on the big 240, or was it the it was the 260, wasn't it? This is the 262C coupe, a very low roofline two-door coupe version of the Volvo 240. Very distinctive looking car. And here the Berlinetta based version, the Opel Manta 1.8S. This is the fastback hatchback version. We saw one of the Opel Manta coupes just a little while ago in this particular compilation. This on a C plate, 1985-ish, I think, this one. Another classic Peugeot here. We've had a few already, and this is the 305. We saw this one at the Trentham Gardens Classic Car Show in 2023, I believe it was. But yeah, great to see this. I hadn't seen one of these for donkeys of years. Classic VW Scirocco here. This is the Mark 1 VW Scirocco. Just about creeps into our age frame. It's on a W plate, 1980-ish. Great to see this one here, and the Mercedes alongside, very similar colour. More Peugeot action. We've had 205s, 309s, 505s, and this is the mighty Peugeot 604, the daddy, the top of the tree when it came to luxury Peugeots. This a left-hand drive example. That is very nice. Fiat Strada now, the Abarth version, probably 130 TC, I would have thought. This was Fiat's answer to the Golf GTI and the Ford XR3Is, that kind of thing. And yeah, this was Fiat's response. It got a souped-up engine, alloy wheels, body kit, and so on. Okay, here we have the 3.5 litre BMW 5 Series, the 535i. This is the E12 era of 5 Series saloon, and this would go on in revised form to become the E28, which is the model we usually see at some of the meetings we go to, but these slightly earlier E12s, not so often. And here, the Reliant Scimitar, this time in GTC form, convertible car version of the Reliant Scimitar GTE. So yeah, the GTC, you don't see all these very often. Ford Sierra. The XR4i is next. I think this had the, was it 2.8 litre, the V6 engine. This on an A plate, so 1983. This would have been a rival to the early Saab 900 turbos, and indeed the BMW 535i's, that kind of thing. And at the totally different end of the scale, performance-wise, we have this, a super duper rare Yugo Sana, circa 1989, the fastback hatchback Yugo, and a particularly rare sight now. I bet that if there are 2 or 3 on the road in this country, I'll be amazed now. Now we have a particularly rare Lancia Beta Berliner, or the Saloon, about 1982 this one. It's the S3 version of the Lancia Beta, and amazing that this one has survived, because these things were notorious for rusting. In fact, Lancia ended up buying a lot of them back. Back to Ford Sierras, and we've had the perky looking XR4i, but this is the one that most people had. This is the 1.6 GL on an A plate, so this is a fairly early one. I seem to remember Neil Kinnock, the former leader of the Labour Party, smashing one of these up in quite a high-profile accident. And on a G plate here, we have a great little Nissan Power, one of the retro-styled Nissans, a bit like the Figaro, you know, old styling, but modern underpinnings underneath that retro body shell. And it was really neat to see this one at Capesthorne Hall. Back down to Bicester on a slightly chilly day. I think this was in January, possibly 2023 maybe. On an E plate we have a Mitsubishi Lancer Estate. And again, it must be almost virtually extinct. How many of these are still on the road? Maybe 5 perhaps. This is a slightly warmer looking day. On the left we have the 1970s or just about 1980s Leyland Princess, and the car that replaced it, the Austin Ambassador. This is the VDP, the Vanden Plas posh version. You can tell that by that chrome strip above the grille. Now we saw a Renault 18 Estate down at Malvern a few minutes ago, and this is the Renault 18 Turbo, again a very rare survivor from a time when many of the main manufacturers started bolting turbos to their cars to give like a bit of a halo model to lift up sales of the more regular examples. Next up we have a Rover, one of the 400 series saloons, this one on an H plate, which puts this one about 1990 or thereabouts, but very much a 1980s design, so I thought I would include it here. Classic Ford here, the Ford Fiesta XR2, so this was kind of the understudy to the XR3i. This was the hot version of the Ford Fiesta. We've got a similarly aged Mini alongside it. This was at an evening meet organised by the Whitchurch Motor Club just a few years ago. That's a really good do, that is. Now we are down at the British Motor Museum at Gaydon. The Austin Allegro is very much a car of the 1970s, but production did just about creep into the 1980s. And here we've got an X-Plater from about 1981, possibly one of the last, if not the last, Allegro built. BMW goodness here. Back down at Bicester you can see the control tower in the background, and this is a particularly nice Alpina version of the 3 Series, the 323i. I suspect the E21 era of BMW 3 Series. A very purposeful looking Escort alongside it. Now this is a classic Suzuki. I had to double check the actual model of this one, but this is the Suzuki Swift. Bit of decals down the side, twin cam 16 valve. That was quite something back in the 1980s. A G526WAC, quite an early example of the Land Rover Discovery 1, this one in Marseille Blue. It is a TDI. Of course you could also get the petrol V8 as well, but that's quite an early one of the WAC series of cars. I think they were pre-production in fact. We're in a field surrounded by old cars, and here an F-plate Ford Sierra Estate, and I'm sure many of you watching this particular video have experiences of Ford Sierras. Again, let me know in the comments your memories of cars of the 1980s. Have I featured cars that you owned in the 1980s, or have I missed some out? Okay, 116BAT is the private registration number on this fantastic looking Alfa Romeo GT-V6, a left-hand drive Alfa GT-V6 in fact, and a very smart set of alloy wheels on this particular car. Look at that thing next door. That is a thing. It is the VW thing. The mighty Aston Martin Lagonda here. What an incredible looking car. That is all very, very high tech, but not exactly renowned with great reliability, as I remember. There were various series of these produced over the years. This is a Series 4, built 87 through to 1990. And this was a particularly rare sighting. We saw this one at the Western Park Classic Car Show, and this was the first one of these I'd seen in years, the Mitsubishi Cordia Turbo. Again, one of those turbo cars of the early to mid 1980s. Everyone was piling on the bandwagon, trying to produce hot versions of their cars by bolting turbos on. And here, a Citroën CX on a V registration, bit of work going on at the NEC Restoration Show one year. More 1980s cars now, and we have the F-plate Jaguar XJ6, the XJ40 era. Now, we saw a 2.9 version earlier on, and I said they did the 3.6 as well, and this is a 3.6 litre car, first put on the road in August of 1988. And at the same venue, the Avro Heritage Museum, we have an F-plate MiniMetro Turbo, no less. This is one of the slightly facelifted cars, looks slightly different graphics compared to the early Metro Turbos of just a couple of years before. But yeah, very, very eye-catching, all that colour-coded white going on. And how cool is this? The Talbot Matra Rancho. Looks like a real off-road, a bit like a Discovery in many ways, but predates the Disco, and these were only two-wheel drive, even though they look like off-roading four-wheel drivers. But what a great car that is. I just love the look of that. I could happily drive around in one of those. And here we have the 2.8i Gear X version of the Ford Granada. This was the posh one. This was the top of the tree with all the mod cons. This one's got alloy wheels, which possibly are off another model, and it even has a tow bar, so you could tow a period caravan behind it as well. So what treats await the owner of that one? And we are back at the NEC, and we have a Fiat Uno Turbo IE on a G registration. Now at another antique centre, I think fairly close to where that Marina Coupe was photographed, we found this, a Ford Granada Estate, looking like it hadn't moved in a little while. I'm not quite sure what the future holds for this particular car, but it seemed a bit of a shame to see it mouldering away here, so maybe it'll be saved. Anyway, looking somewhat happier is this, the Peugeot. This is the 505 GR Estate. This was spotted at Bicester Heritage, a particularly handsome car in metallic green. Great to see some steel wheels, and yeah, very, very nice car. Left-hand drive as well. And we are back at the NEC on the Toyota Club stand. We've got HNF337Y. That is a Toyota Celica 2-litre ST Avon convertible. Yeah, that's a particularly unusual sight. I can't imagine there were many of those around even when that car was new. Classic Cavalier time. We had the SR before, and this is a 1985 or 6 Cavalier Commander limited edition. Those wheels, I think I've seen those also on some of the more market versions of the Astra Mark II. Yeah, that is a rare, rare limited edition car there. And on a B plate we have B94 WKN, a Skoda Rapid, one of the 120 series Skodas. Incredible car, rear engined. This is a convertible, and quite a big boot in the front there as well. So yeah, really, really interesting cars, Skodas back then. Of course now they're just part of the VW Audi group. Another wonderful wagon here, JFE 585Y, the Mazda 929. What an incredible looking car that is, complete with brown vinyl roof, metallic paint, all the luxuries, clearly aiming at Mercedes I think with that particular car. D497EDH is next. That is the Suzuki SJ410. Great stuff. Vauxhall here, and this is H191BGY, a Vauxhall Carlton GSI 3000 24 valves. So this was the quick one. This was the, well, until the Lotus Carlton came along, that is, this was the quickest, most upmarket version of the Vauxhall Carlton for the 1980s. We've seen Saab 900s, and this is the Saab 99, the design of which dates back to the 1970s, but they were produced into the 1980s. Quite a lot of turbos were preserved, but this is your 99 GL, a non-turbo car. This one has got 900 turbo alloy wheels on it, but otherwise looks pretty standard. And while driving around France a little while ago, we stumbled across this oh-so-original Citroën Visa, and like the 99, the design of the 1970s, but production did creep into the 1980s, so why not include it here? What a great survivor that is. Now we are down at Malvern on a very, very sunny day, and on the left plate we have the Mazda 121 3-door hatchback. One of those kind of cars that's all but disappeared now, with just odd survivors in appreciative hands, like this bright red example here. Now, I mean, the midget design, that can trace its roots back all the way back to the Frog Eye Sprite, really. But sort of, what's this, about V plate, so 1979 or 80. The MG Midget 1500, pretty much the last gasp of the MG Midget before it was finally pensioned off. And just a few years newer, but not that many more years newer, this is the Toyota Sierra, or Serra, on a G plate with that very distinctive gull wing door arrangement. Really, really neat looking car they are. Occasionally you see club stands at some of the events we go to, and it's, yeah, very, very eye-catching. And here we've got one of the Rover 200 series cars. This is one of the upmarket ones, the Van den Plas version, with all the mod cons and extra stripes down the side, and a very smart set of wheel trims, and in beautiful condition, this one. Honda Legend Coupe graces our screen now. This one from about 1987 or thereabouts. We saw a slightly earlier Legend before, this 4-door saloon, but this is the rakish Coupe. Ford Capri time. This is another one of those designs that came out in the 1960s, the late 1960s, beginning of the 1970s, but was still being produced well into the mid-1980s. Very smart too, 2.8 litre fuel-injected engine in this one. The Nissan 300C Saloon is next. Proud chrome radiator grille there and headlamp wipers, aiming very much at sort of contemporary Mercedes and BMWs with this one. This was on the club stand down at the NEC Classic Car Show. VW Polo here now on a B reg, about 1984. Quite neat little cars, these ones. Yeah, you don't see these too often in regular use anymore, mainly coming out for shows. BMW 635 CSI is next. Very, very nice car indeed. Again, one of those cars that started out in the 70s and continued right through until the 1980s. So yeah, quite a good production run on these particular cars. VW, what am I talking about? Citroëns, a pair of Citroëns here, the BX Estate in the foreground, and a Staffordshire registered Citroën AX alongside that. Here is the Opel Monza that I referred to earlier when looking at that Vauxhall Royale Coupe. A10 GSE is the registration number, which is very appropriate because this is the Monza GSE. Very, very nice too. Some natty alloy wheels and mud flaps on this particular example. Next up, G468 SBW, a Toyota Corolla Estate. A VW Jetta Saloon alongside that. Well, back to Crewe Heritage Centre. We saw the Maestro before, and this is its bigger brother, the Austin Montego, circa 1986 or 7. classic Volvo here. Well, maybe we should be calling it a DAF, because it was a DAF design, and Volvo took them over and put it into production as one of their own. This is the 345, quite an unusual looking car indeed. Hatchback, yeah, quite a distinctive looking car. And we are back to Audi, and here we have a modified, much modified Audi 80 Quattro, the four-wheel drive version of the Audi 80, with a similarly aged Audi Coupe alongside that. More VW action here on a very damp day at Alton Park. Slightly sunnier was the day that we photographed this Fiat Panda circa 1987. Great looking cars, and especially the four-wheel drive versions of these are very popular now, and very useful cars by all accounts. But yeah, great simple back to basics motoring hatchback and a full-length roof on this one. Then we are back at Bicester Heritage, and we have a two-door version of the Vauxhall Chevette, production of which just about crept in to the 1980s. Of course, you get the estates, and there was the Chevan Bedford version as well, a van version of the estate, four-door saloons, and here the two-door saloons and the hatchbacks as well. So yeah, great variety. And we saw a Mark I version of the VW Scirocco just a few minutes ago, and this is the facelifted car, the Mark II version of the Volkswagen Scirocco. G-Reg, circa 1989, this particular car. Seen here at the Trentham Gardens Classic Car Show, and we're back at the NEC. C92 SLY is a particularly rare Alfa Romeo 90 Bertone style. These were built from 1984 to 1987 with either inline 4 or V6 engine options. Yeah, that is such a rare car. I wonder how you go on finding parts for that. Slightly less rare, but this is quite a late example of the good old MGB GT, a design which can trace its roots back to the mid-1960s. The GT came along in sort of late 65, early 66, and the Roadster came out in 62. And while driving around France on the same trip that we saw that Visa a little while ago, we have a Renault 9 TSE. Now this was badged up as a turbo. Was there actually a turbo version of these? I really don't remember, to be honest, so let me know in the comments if this is a turbo or just a bit of optimistic badging, because I'd be interested to know. Okay, one of the less sporting versions now of the Saab 900, the four-door saloon version. This is the 900i. So it's the about 2 litre engine, just under 2 litres, fuel injected, and around about 118 brake horsepower, I think they were. And here, enjoying the sunshine, quite a late example of Fiat 124 Spider taking part in a historic rally. And there is a very smart RS2000 alongside it, probably a similar age, those two cars. And behind it, a Porsche. Very, very nice trio there. And who remembers these, if only for the sound and the Talbot Horizon. One of these was Mrs. OCC's first ever car, and that is a particularly rare survivor and of great shade of brown, and I love that old dealer sign on the floor just next to it on the left there. So yeah, great to see that. And this is the four-wheeled Reliant, the small Reliant Kitten. This one is probably about 1981 in date, and a lovely shade of yellow as well. This was on the Owners Club stand down at the National Exhibition Centre. Yeah, really, really cool. Not all Reliants were three-wheelers or scimitars. We are back to Bicester, quite an early start. This one was, I remember that very well. You can see the sun just rising in the distance. This is a Bath-tuned version of the Fiat 126, circa 1988. This particular car, April of 88, it was put on the road, this great little car. And what a lot of fun that looks. Very, very unusual car here, and this was also at Bicester. This is the Aston Martin Zagato. These were built from 1986 through to 1990. Some of the Zagato style, it could be quite unusual. Think of the Alfa Romeo SZ as well. That was quite an eye-catching car as well. The classic Lancia Beta here. This one on the B plate. This is the HPE VX, the supercharged version of the station wagon Lancia Beta. yeah, one of those cars which, you know, they've all but disappeared and only really survive in any numbers in hot, warm climates. And now this is an unusual little Nissan, very, very unusual. This is a D-registration Nissan Sunny Coupe SLX from 1987, and that is absolutely immaculate. How you keep those plastic bits that shiny after all these years, I really don't know. There must be a lot of work's gone into that one. And here, one of my favourite cars, a Saab 99 Turbo. We've seen various Saabs already in this upload, from 96s through to 99s and 900s, and this is the two-door 99 Turbo. Very, very nice car, 8-valve turbo, about 145 brake horsepower, although there was a water injection kit which bumped that up to 175. And talking of turbo cars, we have the MG Montego Turbo here, G414 FOB. A particularly sunny day when I photographed this 5-door Nissan Bluebird. We saw the 4-door turbo saloon quite a while ago now, much earlier in this particular compilation, and this is a white 5-door hatch that we do see at quite a few classic car shows that we get to now. This, I think, at Tatton Park, and this could also be Tatton Park. It's on a C plate, and we have a Vauxhall Senator, the 3-litre ICD. So this was the posh one. You can see the headlamp wipers. That was usually a sign that you were looking at one of the upper market versions in the range. Pop-up sunroof as well, headrests front and rear. Next up, Honda Civic, rear 3/4 view of a little 3-door Civic hatchback on an F plate, and this car would have been put on the road late 1988 or early 1989. Some Alfa Romeo goodness here on the Owners Club stand. A very, very smart Sprint there in the foreground, and a slightly earlier example alongside it. Very, very nice. Another classic car show on another particularly sunny day. Who remembers those? This is the Rover 200, the boxy Rover 200 of the 1980s. Could it be a 213 or a 216 perhaps? I don't think I've got a note of this particular model, but yeah, car favoured by Hyacinth Bouquet, of course, and keeping up appearances on TV. And we are at an evening meet here at the Swettenham Arms pub, and this is a TVR Tasman. Very, very unusual car. TVR, of course, built up in Blackpool, fiberglass bodywork as well. Very, very distinctive styling on these cars. Now, who remembers owning these? The Ford Cortina, the 1.6 GL, in this case the Mark V Ford Cortina. We saw an estate version of this a little while ago, many, many photos ago, and this is your regular 3-box Cortina Saloon. Very, very nice too. One of the last, I imagine. And over on the Isle of Wight, while visiting the Bus and Coach Museum, we stumbled across this parked next to the road. Well, looks like it's been parked there a little while, semi-derelict J-plate Volvo 240 saloon. Now, J-Reg is actually 1991, but these were built throughout the 80s, so I thought, well, why not include it here? And look at this, a Y-plate Porsche 944, looks like a very well-used example. Looks like it's probably someone's daily driver, and it's probably all the better for that. Still quite a few 1980s cars to come in this collection. We are back down at the NEC on the Toyota Enthusiast Club stand, and a B-plate Toyota Corolla GT, the twin cam version. So this was the hot Corolla of the era, and I'm sure survivors, you could probably count on the fingers of one hand the number of these that are still on the road here in the UK. And look at this, when did you last see one of these? This is the Fiat Argenta. These were introduced in 1981 and built until about 1985. It was basically an updated version of the Fiat 132 that came before. Yeah, great to see that. Really, really nice. And we've seen XR2s before. Mark II we saw a little while ago, and this is the Fiesta Mark I XR2. Very, very cool. Were these sold alongside the Super Sport, or did they replace the Super Sport? Perhaps if you know your Ford Fiestas, you could put a note in the comments, because that'd be quite interesting to know. And another Rover SD1, this one on a W registration, so just about creeping into our decade, on that 1980-ish, up on ramps. Bit of work being done on this one at the Restoration Show one year. Classic Saab here, 900, a 5-door 900 turbo being given some exercise on a classic car rally. This stage was held over in North Wales just a few years ago, and the car itself dates to about 1983, I would have thought. And how about one of these, the rotary-engined Mazda RX-7. This is one of the first series cars, and yeah, quite an eye-catching car. With a Vauxhall rotary engine under that low-lying bonnet. I do like the pop-up headlamps, very similar to those on our MX-5. Another Toyota Samba here. We had the cabriolet version at the Morton Hampstead Motor Museum. I did a separate video of that place. That's well worth catching if you haven't seen it yet. And this was on a historic rally, parked up for a moment at Alton Park in the car park. And yeah, it's really nice to see this 3-door hatch version of the Talbot Samba. More Vauxhall Cavalier rarity now, and this is the SRI, the 5-door hatchback version of the fuel-injected Cavalier SRI. This was the quick one. This one's got a tow bar on it and a very purposeful looking exhaust pipe sticking out under the bumper there. And from the same angle, another Ford Fiesta, but this is a super rare version of 1.1S. This must be one of the rarest variants of the Mark I Fiesta of all, I would have thought. You know, for every 10 XR2s you see, you may just see one of these if you're lucky. This was a super rare car, and it's left-hand drive. Okay, the mighty Mercedes, the 126 series car. This is the SEC, the S-Class Coupe, the C126 series cars. Very, very nice. Some of them are straight sixes, but I think most of them probably had the V8 engine under that bonnet. There's a Gilburn alongside it. And we are back to Vauxhall Novas. We saw a 5-door hatch a little while ago, and this is the very distinctive 2-door saloon. Quite a rare car, and this one is so clean. I've talked about this one before in previous uploads, but even under the wheel arches, it's absolutely immaculate. How this one has survived in that condition, I have no idea. And we are back to Alfa Romeo briefly. We have an Alfa Romeo 33 here on display at the Capesthorne Hall Classic Car Show, an event that we get to quite regularly most years. Now, a nice rare Ford Sierra here. This is the XR6, or is it the XR8? I can't remember now. But it's a South African variant, V8 powered. Yeah, so it's the XR8, isn't it? An incredible car. Sounds really, really nice, this one, but they never sold these here in the UK. This was purely a South Africa special that someone's brought in. And we are back to Talbot Alpines. We had the Rapier Limited Edition before, and this is the Talbot Alpine GL, the 1.6 Series 2, built in 1984. So this car is now 40 years old at the time of recording this particular video. And yeah, wow, rare car. And you don't see too many of these either. This is one of the slightly later examples of the Alfa Romeo Alfa Sud. This one circa 1982, and this bronze metallic example does crop up at several of the car events that we do get to throughout the year, and it's always great to see one of these because I don't know of any others in the area. And oh, look at this, we had to include one of these, the DeLorean, the W-Reg 1980-ish DeLorean DMC-12 cars built over at a specially built plant in Northern Ireland, powered by the V6 Peugeot Renault Volvo engine, if memory serves. We're back to Bicester, and we've got a foreign registered Audi here, quite an unusual one. I think this is an Audi 80 Quattro, a 2-door Audi 80, which makes it quite unusual. Wonder what date that car is. Does anyone know based on that car registration? More Saabs, but you don't see these all that often. You see 900s occasionally, but this is the 9000 Turbo on an E-plate, 16-valve engine, and these ones, same as some of the quicker 900s. Yeah, big 5-door hatchback, and later saloon versions would also be introduced of these cars. C142 JGL, well, you don't see too many of these. They're Russian-built Moskvich, motoring on a budget for your Russian motorist. I imagine you probably had to save up quite a few years to be able to afford one of those. Slightly bigger than a Larder, I think, by the look of it. Another classic Vauxhall Nova here. This is one of the 3-door hatches, the Club Limited Edition. I well remember these when they came out. I think the brochures are still in the box here somewhere. There was also a club version of the Mark II Astra offered. And again, lots of body-coloured mouldings on these cars. Body-coloured parts was all the rage back in the 1980s. And here, a Range Rover, one of the classic Range Rovers from about 1981. Probably got the 3.5 litre V8 under that bonnet. Yeah, quite a handsome looking car. Of course, when they first came out, they were only 2 doors with a hatch at the back, and then they introduced these, the 4 or the 5 door, I suppose it is. We're back to big Nissans here, big luxurious Nissans here. F840 SMK is the registration number of this 1988 Nissan Laurel SGX edition. Very, very nice shiny set of wheels on it as well. Still a few more 1980s cars to go, and here we have a 99 Turbo Saab, this one with the airflow kit on it, which makes it a bit more unusual, and it's in red as well. We saw a black one before, but yeah, it's got the extra body extensions and those wheel arch extensions you can just see over the top of the original Inca alloy wheels, which are standard fit on the 99 Turbos. And we are at a classic car event, I think at Capesthorne Hall here. A great little Toyota Starlet here, E-plate, so about 1987 is the date of this one. It's got non-original wheels on it, but yeah, very, very rare survivor indeed. And how about one of these if you need a practical classic? The Eventa Estates car version of the Jaguar XJS. I think this was up in the, possibly in the auction area, certainly up for sale at one of the NEC meetings that I went to a year or 2 back. I wonder where this one is now. How many are still left of those? And this is the Panther Solo. The first Panther Solos had the 1.6 litre, the Ford CVH engine, probably out of an XR2 I think. This is the Solo 2, the much more powerful car. This has got the Sierra RS engine, the 2 litre and 4-wheel drive. But yeah, that is a particularly rare car to round out this Volume 2 collection of cars of the 1980s. Thank you very much for watching this particular video. I'll dig out and put a link to Volume 1 at the end of this one in just a few moments. So thank you very much for watching. Please like, comment, subscribe, all that kind of thing if you haven't subscribed yet. There are, well, hundreds and hundreds of videos on the channel now, so please have a look around before you disappear, and there'll be many, many more videos along very, very soon. So, bye for now.